have a very, very special episode today because this is only the second time that I am interviewing an author. The first time was when I interviewed Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and this time I'm interviewing Vedashree Khambete-Sharma, who is this young lady whom you can see on your screens. She is a friend of mine, a former colleague, and she has just published her third book. So I'm really impressed with her, of course. She describes her book as a dark comic thriller. I'll let her explain to you what that means. Of her three books, I've read this one and the previous one, which is good because it's kind of like a series because it's the same central character in the previous book. So I'll let her tell you about her books, and I'll let her tell you especially about what this book is all about, and then we'll go into further questions. So welcome, Vedashree, or Veda as I call you, or
Thanks,
or Vedashreeks as social media calls you. So welcome, Veda. It's lovely in this age of lockdowns and the pandemic and being stuck in our homes. At least we're getting to meet. We're getting to eat, as people say.
Yes, absolutely.
So please tell us about what this dark comic thriller is all about.
Okay, so like you said, this is the second in a series that I'm writing with a central character called Avantika Pandit, who is an ex-investigative reporter who has had like a sojourn in feature writing, but now she kind of wants to get back to crime reporting. And that is essentially her arc. In this particular story, she has got a bunch of coded text messages from an unknown sender. And she has been very strictly warned by her editor that you will please stay away from, reporting any kind of crime stories because you're not ready for it yet. But because she is who she is, she kind of, chases down this particular story, and it leads her to a lot of crime and mayhem and all of that sort. Now, that being said, she herself is a extremely, I think, sarcastic character. She has very witty monologues, and that makes up for a lot of fun and games. So it's in that sense, I think it's a little different from the kind of things that you usually see in crime fiction, where you have this hard-boiled detective with like this, tragic past, and he is like, kind of exploring or like meeting the demons of his past and all of that. It makes for very dark reading. Whereas here you have this person who is, dealing with dark subjects, but at the same time, inside of her mind, she's like, oh my God, I am so stupid. What am I doing? Who behaves like this? So it is all very, it's funny inside her head and not so funny outside, which is why I described it as a dark comic thriller.
Yeah, and I have to tell the audience that, because I know Veda, and this character, Avantika, in the book she's a Maharashtrian girl in Bombay, and she works she's a journalist. And Veda, before she joined advertising, she still is a Maharashtrian girl, a woman in Bombay, and she used to be a journalist as well. So and of course, Veda was always known for her sarcasm when in our little group of friends and colleagues. And so I just so there are a lot of funny passages in the book, and I laugh because it is funny, and B, because I imagine Veda as a slightly younger Veda as Avantika, or as some South Bombay people say, Avantika.
Yes, in the book.
So to coming to the style of the book, there is a sort of technique or a writing style or linguistic style that you've used, Veda, is what is known as Chutnification, right?
Yes.
So will you tell us about what Chutnification is? As far as I know, this is a term that was invented by Salman Rushdie.
Yes.
But it's been used by various post-colonial authors in different countries. In fact, some of the writers are among my favorite writers. So I'll let you tell us what Chutnification is, and who are the people who've used it and why they've used it, why you've used it, and what is the unique way in which you've used it in your book.
Sure. So, like you said,
and by the way, I just realized that we've not mentioned the name of your book.
it is called Fatal Mistakes. Here it is. This is the copy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
correct.
Fatal Mistakes. This is an advanced copy that I was lucky to get. Yeah. So it's Fatal Mistakes, and so tell us about this writing style that you've employed in it.
So, like you said, Chutnification as a term and as a style was, invented by Rushdie. He used it first in Midnight's Children, and he had used the word Chutnification to describe the way he uses language in that book, right? And it's not just, when you're saying that, when he meant, what he meant was that, he hadn't just kind of used Indian, English words with Indian origins, like say Jodhpurs or jungle, which by the way, you covered very brilliantly with Dr. Tharoor in your episode of English, that which I thoroughly enjoyed. But this also refers to, generally using Indian words and expressions, like innately Indian words and expressions which may not necessarily be a part of English, but to use it as part of your text to give it a kind of flavor, right? So that is what Rushdie also meant, that he essentially chutnified English by doing that, and that was the origin of the term. Now, coming to who all have used it, there have been so many authors, like some of like you said, like some of the really greatest authors in the world have used this kind of tactic, whether it's Chinua Achebe, whether it's Chimamanda Adichie, all of them, both of them use Igbo words when they are writing their books. And back home, Rushdie, of course, is a classic example. But then you also see Kiran Nagarkar and Ravan and Eddy, who has had a blast using Hindi, Marathi, the works. It's just such a rich tapestry that he's made in that book. And there's Rohinton Mistry also, and a lot of his books, you see the use of Indian language words as part of the text. So yeah, it's pretty commonly used.
Of course, I think that a lot of people, particularly in India, have read Midnight's Children and the other books by Salman Rushdie, but possibly they've not read so many books by Chinua Achebe or Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and who are both Nigerian authors.
Yes.
And among, I've read some of their novels, and they really left impact on me. In fact, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe is something that I read in college. I've never really studied literature at the college level, but the one literature course that I've taken in my entire life, one of the books that was required reading in it was Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And much later, in recent times, I discovered Chimamanda, another Nigerian author, and I just absolutely fell in love with her writing. In fact, there's something she says, and this I think is something that we as Indians can relate to, that when Westerners read books about our countries, they normally see just one view of it, which is usually the very tragic view of the poverty of our country, whereas there is, of course, that is a sad reality, but there's a lot more to it than that. Either it's the romanticized sort of romance of the Raj in India's case, or it's about the abject
grimy,
poverty. In fact, of course, I'm not saying that doesn't make for great reading, because Rohinton Mistry, A Fine Balance, is one of my absolute favorite books, and he does talk a lot about the poverty. The main characters are really poverty stricken, but they are just absolutely amazing, memorable characters. And one of, I would imagine, your favorite writers is Nagarkar and Ravan and Eddy.
Oh, I love it.
And
love it.
Since he's another Maharashtrian author who's written English novels set in Bombay, I think that you would find a lot in common. So just tell us a little bit about how they've used it, and then you move on to how you've used it in your book. Because sure. I know that part of it is in the dialogue, but also you've used this interesting device which we don't normally see in fiction. So I'll let you talk for a while now because there's a lot of questions rolled into one.
No, sure. So, like, it's funny that you should mention Things Fall Apart, because that is actually the first book in which RGP had used this kind of, peppering the text with the Igbo words experiment of his. And I have a quote from him, which I'm going to read to you. So he basically said that, I feel that the English language will be able to carry the weight of my African experience, but it will have to be a new English, still in full communion with its ancestral home, but altered to suit its new African surroundings. So if you think about it, right, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's India, all of us are, we share a colonial past in that sense. Like, we have now reached a point where many of us think in English as opposed to our own mother tongues, but that doesn't mean that the language itself is innately our own. It is something we have had to learn, right? So I think what Achibi in Things Fall Apart, or Adichie in when it's half of a yellow sun or purple hibiscus, I think when they use those Igbo phrases, it is also a little bit like reclaiming the experience without completely surrendering to the language, which I think is an interesting trait that post-colonial writers use as a whole, right? I mean, if you read Nagarkar Ravana Devi, and I will talk more about that book because not only have I studied it as part of my literature course, but it's also one of my favorites. He has, when you read the book, you're reading it in English, but at no point will you feel alienated by anything in it, right? Because the experiences in the book are so very much Indian, right? I mean, he is a Maharashtrian. He is writing about Bombay at a certain time. He's talking about the chawl experience, which not all of us would have, obviously have first-hand experience with, but it is so immersive. And I think one of the reasons it's so immersive is because whether it's in his dialogue or in his description of the setting of the chawl, he uses Indian words, he uses Indianisms, he uses turns of phrase, or he kind of, like rewrites the English language in such a way that all of us will kind of have heard it and therefore feel a greater affinity to it than if he would have written it in the Queen's English, right? So that is essentially it. When it comes to Ravana and Eddie, there are like just too many examples to give, which are fantastic. I remember he's done this one cutaway passage where he only talks about Shammi Kapoor and Yahoo and Jungli and that entire phenomenon. And I was born much after the Shammi Kapoor era, but when I read it, I get it. Right? I mean, at no point as a reader am I thinking, oh my God, what is he talking about? I have no idea. Because if you are an Indian and if you have lived in India for any amount of time, if you are even slightly aware of the phenomenon that is Bollywood in this country, you will relate because of the way he's written it, because of what he's written it. So, did I just say what he's written? That's terrible, because of what he's written, obviously. But yeah, so I think the fact that we all have a post-colonial past has a lot to do with this tendency to use Indian words or Indian turns of phrases in what we write as authors. So I would say that would be the answer to one question.
Right now, so let's now move on to the reason that we are talking to each other today, which is fatal mistakes. So tell us about how you have used chutnification in this book.
Okay. So in Fatal Mistakes, and I think it's where you won't tell also to a certain extent, the chutnification happens on two levels, in terms of words and in terms of syntax. So what I mean is that, words like chakna, for instance, that is such a, if you try to translate that in English, what are you going to say, right? Like salted peanuts had with alcohol at a particular time by a particular kind. It like the description far outweighs the word, right? But if you're talking to an Indian and you say chakna, they instantly know what you're talking about. So in that sense, I've used words like that, which kind of not exactly English, but which when you're reading it as an Indian, you just instinctively get. So that is one part of it. And the other part of it is the syntax in the sense that I have kind of written dialogue in a way, the rules of grammar in English are very different from the rules of grammar in, say, a Hindi or a Marathi, right? The way we speak changes because of that. Now, if I have to say, if I have to show a Maharashtrian character or a Hindi heartbelt character talking in English, and if they're suddenly kind of adhering to the rules of grammar in English, for me, it sounds a little off, because that is not how people would talk. That is not how people talk in India, right? So that is why what I have done is I have made the dialogue such that it sounds as if a native Marathi or a native Hindi speaker is speaking in English. So to give a very bad example, when Catholics in Bandra speak, right, they will speak like that men, right? Now they will not speak like this, or that men, for instance, is something which you don't see in proper English, but it is a dialect, and when you make it a part of the dialogue, it adds that much authenticity to the dialogue and to the character. So yeah, in terms of words and in terms of syntax, I have chutnified the heck out of my book.
So tell me something. There are two aspects to this, right? Because one is somebody who, like a Catholic in Bandra, would actually be speaking in English in a particular way. That's so when you represent that, or when you accurately portray that style of speaking, that's, I suppose, one kind of chutnification. Yes. And the other is when the person is actually speaking in Marathi or Hindi, and you are trying to faithfully convey that using a slightly different kind of English. So I guess chutnification largely talks about that or speaks to that.
Okay, so a great example is drink slowly, slowly, right? So when you're speaking in proper English, you'll say, drink it a little slowly, or go easy on the water or whatever. But if you're speaking in Marathi or Hindi, you will say dhire dhire piyo, or hadu hadu pi. You will not say. And that's why when I write a character saying something like that, I will faithfully write drink slowly, slowly. So not just because the dialect is like that, but because the way Marathi or Hindi is spoken, if you kind of bring it to English, that is what that dialogue will sound like.
But I've also heard people saying drink fastly.
No, that is just I have no explanation for that. I can say walk fast. That's like fastly is like
fastly is a good chutnified opposite of slowly.
It is a new mutant hybrid, I would say.
Right. I'm the
English nut.
Bye.
Bye.
For now.